What's up, War Rapport family? I am your host, C Dub. Who should Auburn football be targeting in the transfer portal? Ike Jones joins me to discuss that and give us his thoughts. Also, we discuss the latest news regarding Auburn basketball in today's edition of the Weekend Tailgate.
You are now listening to a War Rapport Weekend Tailgate, brought to you by
Athletic Architect.
It's your boy, Ike Jones. Be real. C-Dog. Mike G. Get ready. Sit on back as we bring you the War Rapport Weekend Tailgate.
Happy Sunday, everyone. We want to welcome two groups. First, our Facebook group, as well as our YouTube family, to the latest edition of the Weekend Tailgate, courtesy of Athletic Architects. The Facebook group will be hanging out with us for the first 30 minutes or the first half of the show. Then we'll transition and then hang out with our YouTube family exclusively. So if you're on the Facebook group, be prepared to head on over to YouTube to continue the conversation, where it's going to get better, I promise. Guys, one of the things that you can do is to help us out with today's show, because it's a good show. Share this content on social media, Facebook, Twitter. Use the hashtag, even at us. Also, like this video, help us in the YouTube algorithm, and subscribe if you're new to the channel. We've got a lot of new people joining Auburn basketball. We got some people in the portal, which means I got a lot of video and film to review, which means there's some exclusive content coming your way. Tell them how they can access that.
Go ahead and hit that join button if you're on YouTube. That's how you become a part of the Green Name Gang, the exclusive community where we are watching film, baby. I know film review might not be sexy to everybody, but film review looks sexy on you. So go ahead and get your little film review status by becoming a member of the War Rapport. You need to become a patron if you want to have that on demand content. But we're going live, reviewing film from A-Day. I got some film coming up for the most recent signings in basketball. That includes Denver Jones and Cheney Johnson. And so you guys need to come on board so we can start talking about this stuff in detail. Looking forward to that. If you're already a member and you want to gift memberships to somebody, let them get that first month of War Rapport membership on you. YouTube will randomly assign that membership to someone else who interacts with our content. You can go ahead and do that right now from the live chat. As always, we're giving away stuff. We'll give away an AU t-shirt today, sponsored by GWT2 Energy Consulting Services. You guys, hashtag get your weight up in the comments. You have to be present to win. So drop that hashtag right now if you want to get an opportunity to win your free t-shirt today. And we'll do that drawing around the 1 hour mark.
Well, Ike, let's go ahead and get into it, sir. Over the past week, we're going to talk basketball first with all the news that's happened there. We knew that Wes Flanagan departed and agreed to join Chris Beard's staff, his first staff at Ole Miss. We knew that there were probably going to be some effects of that, or Auburn would feel the effects of that, and we did. Last week, LeBaron Fallon, the point guard who was committed for 2024, chose to decommit from Auburn, with Wes Flanagan being his lead recruiter, which really led Auburn fans to say, hey, when are we finding the replacement for Wes, so that we can stop the bleeding? And we did. It was announced late last week that Corey Williams joins Auburn's men's basketball coaching staff. He brings with him a total of 24 years of coaching experience. Recently spent the last 2 seasons as an assistant at Texas Tech, where he also served as interim head coach during the Big 12 tournament. Prior to his time at Texas Tech, Williams also served as an assistant to Eric Musselman's staff at Arkansas. He's known, people have been mentioning this when he's been announced, but he's known in his playing career as being a part of the NBA champion Chicago Bulls in 1993.
Doubles.
you're a big Bulls fan. Do you remember Corey Williams?
I remember him being on the team. He didn't get very much playing time, but he
I
was
know you
there.
did not, but but I just wonder if you remembered him.
Listen, man, I remember a bunch of role players for the. I'm an actual Bulls fan. I'm not
Me
like
too.
these fake LeBron fans that hop around to whatever team he's on. Like I actually am a fan of the Bulls, right? So yeah, guess
Yeah,
that's a
man.
shot at them.
So so yeah, he's known for being, and again, he's been a head coach.
Hmm.
Corey Williams has been a head coach. He's also served as an assistant at Florida State. So he has a lot of coaching experience. And for the most part, Ike, people have been real big on this hire. So with that, I want to ask you your thoughts on the latest addition to this coaching staff. How does he fit in with this coaching staff, recruiting wise? Just what do you know about him? How do you feel about this pickup?
I mean, so I am not going to pretend like I'm some guy who follows the coaching careers of assistant coaches around the country. But what I do know about him, since kind of taking a look at him, since his name started coming up in the conversation to replace Wes Flanagan, is that he's a dynamic recruiter. And that's exactly what this staff needed to replace
Yeah,
him, is a guy who can go in there and get talent. Flanagan seems to be more of a guard recruiter. And from what I'm looking at with Williams, is that he likes guards, but he really flourishes with like those big guards, more of the shooting guard, small forward type guards, right? So, which has not been something that Coach Pearl has been doing a lot of, is getting the bigger guards in here.
sure.
That's something that Auburn fans have wanted. So, looking forward to seeing how his success in the past and being able to get those bigger players translates over to the Auburn scheme and what we want to do in regard to being able to shoot and push tempo, even though that's not really what we did last season. But still, going to be interesting to see how his recruiting prowess translates over to what Coach Pearl and staff want to be able to do. He checks just about, I mean, I can't think of a box that he doesn't check for what this coaching staff needed to be able to fill the hole left behind by Wes Flanagan. So looking forward to seeing what he does.
So it sounds like Bruce Pearl strategically went after this guy because of how they want to restructure Auburn's roster moving forward. And I think it sounds like he fits perfectly into where Bruce Pearl and staff want to go.
I mean, it's looking like it. If you look at the roster and how it's being composed for this next season, it's definitely a bigger roster. And I think that's just the direction that college basketball is going with the positionless basketball that's happening in the NBA, is that you just need players that are for the style of defense that Coach Pearl wants to run, with a lot of switching, and they don't really want to have to play matchups necessarily defensively. He wants to be able to pressure the ball out top and funnel to a shot blocker. You need big, versatile players out top to be able to do that. Again, he's favored smaller guards that have been like the general out there on the floor. But again, in the positionless basketball, being able to have people who can do all the switching out top and not have a bunch of mismatches that you're getting into when you're getting into pick and roll defense, or having to defend like the curls, which we struggled with a lot last season. You need the players to be versatile in that way. So hopefully the direction that we're moving will be able to be conducive to that, with the larger players able to switch out onto guards.
So I know we had the Marshall kid, the big center, who decommitted a couple of weeks back, and it seems like that was a mutual parting of ways.
Right.
But I don't think Auburn is really ready to let go of Liberian Fallon, the point guard kid. So, how do you think Corey Williams factors into trying to bring him back into the fold? Obviously, Wes Flanagan, you have to agree, Wes Flanagan has the edge here just based off the relationship that they've established. But how do you think Corey Williams can factor into getting LeBaron Fallon to kind of reconsider, seeing as though he's been all Auburn up to this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think it factors in pretty heavily, as long as that relationship still feels as good as the previous one. But you have a lot less time to figure out how that relationship is going to mesh, because Wes Flanagan had been working this for like a couple years now, right?
Right.
And that's not to say that Corey Williams has never had any interaction with him, but I doubt it's been as heavy with him being down the road, right? Like it's a car trip for west, it's a flight for Corey Williams, right? But now he'll have an opportunity to potentially get back in there. And I do think, as you said, that Auburn is still wanting to be able to preserve that relationship, and that's what makes this transfer portal stuff so interesting, right? Because um, depending upon who you go and get in the transfer portal will have a lot to do with how LeBaron Philon feels about coming to Auburn because of minutes that he might want to get or he thought he was going to be able to get if you go and get another guard with a lot of eligibility type of thing, right? Denver Jones, I think, was the sweet spot for Auburn with only 2 years of eligibility remaining. Not sure if he's even going to exercise the second one after this season, depending upon how good a season it is. So you had plenty of minutes available to offer him. Cheney Johnson's going to be out of the program after next year, likely. So he was in a good spot to be able to come in and get minutes immediately. So it's going to be interesting to see how we fill out this roster and where he fits into that entire picture after seeing what kind of season Aiden Holloway has. So, yeah, I do think that Corey Williams is going to get in and try to preserve that relationship and keep the 24 guard situation looking favorable.
We see some of you guys' comments here as it pertains to this subject here. Jags J23, who just recently became a member, welcome. He says hashtag he gone, referring to Philon. He thinks that Auburn doesn't really have much of a chance of getting him back. Corey Weber says, I think Bama is more of a threat for Philon than Ole Miss. We still have a chance. Philon is concerned about the guards being brought in. And that's something let's talk about that, Ike, because Auburn, even with some departures at their position, Auburn still seems to be kind of stacked now and for the future at the guard position. Is that a legitimate concern in terms of Philon?
I mean, I don't know how it's more of a concern than it was when he signed, right? So if you think about where we were when he signed, you had Wendell Green on the roster, you had KD on the roster, you had
Donaldson.
Yeah, Trey Donaldson was on the roster at that point in time, Zep Jasper on the roster at that point in time. You lose Wendell Green and then you pick up Denver Jones, right? So you're not really in a different spot from a guard standpoint. And Aiden Holloway was already coming in the 23 class, right? So you're essentially in the same spot. I think the only major difference is the Denver Jones situation being one which he could potentially still be here in 24. I think everyone had conceded to the fact that both Wendell Green, you knew Zep Jasper wasn't going to be here,
KD
but both Wendell Green and KD would be gone by 24, right? So you would only have Trey Donaldson, Aiden Holloway still left on the roster for people you knew would be there. And then you bring in Pettifor and Philon, and so you have your 4-guard lineup still intact with 2 guys who had been here a couple of years, 2 very new guys. So the Denver Jones signing may have had something to do with that. I just don't see it being as big a factor because KD is likely out of here next year. So you would still have Trey Donaldson, Aiden Holloway, and Denver Jones potentially next year. Pettifor coming in, Philon being 5. So that's 5 guards that aren't super tall, right? Like you're going to have somewhere between, Pettifor is 5'11", I think 6. I mean, he's short, right? And then you've got Aiden Holloway, who's a generous 6'2", and then Denver Jones, who's 6'4". Pettifor is going to
he's playing the wing. He's playing like a 2.
Yeah, he's not going to play point, but you still have Aiden, who's a point, Pettifor, who's a point, Philon, who's a point. Right? So you have Donaldson, who's a point, right? You have 4 point guards. Somebody's going to have to be an off-ball guy, which means you're going to have a short lineup in there at some point in time, getting back to some of the problems that we've had from a size perspective. I think Aiden probably plays better off-ball than he does at point, but we'll see how that rounds out into next season. But at any rate, it definitely is a guard-heavy team at that point in time. So you've got to figure out if you want to play significant minutes as a freshman, maybe this isn't the place for you to come in and do that, right? Just because there's going to be experienced guys who are going to be good, who are going to be playing in front of you. And then you've got another true freshman coming in with you. It felt kind of weird at the time, I'm not going to lie, for us to sign 2 dynamic scoring guards for that class. So it's not unexpected with Wes Flanagan getting out of here. The question is, as Corey says, um, who's the bigger threat for him to go to? If he wants to stay in state, then there is another dynamic place in state for him to go. Low key, UAB has, a chance to land him. Like, people aren't talking about that, but I do think that the UAB program has proven that they can get dynamic guards to the next level. I think Jelly Walker, even though he was a transfer in, is going to be a guard that's going to make noise at the next level. So the UAB program still has an opportunity at him as well. But I think that would be his top three suitors: Bama, UAB, if he's going to give him a sincere look, and then Ole Miss.
Oda Smith asked, C-Dub, Ike, how you guys feel if Bruce brought in Chris Porter on the staff somewhere? I don't know if Chris Porter is coaching, is he?
I have not seen anything about Chris Porter. It wouldn't make a lot of sense for this to be his first coaching stop. And I don't know how significant that would be for as big a name as Chris Porter is for Auburn. I don't know that he moves the needle nationally for anybody. From a coaching standpoint, it's a little bit different when you talk about people like Cadillac Williams coming in, who's an Auburn legend, but also had the NFL experience, also had some coaching experience before he got here to come in and do a position room.
Right.
I don't see him being anything that would move the needle as far as recruiting or anything as that concerned.
Yeah. Let's talk about the second bit of news that occurred with Auburn basketball. Auburn actually had a visitor on last week and actually left Auburn a commitment, but waited to announce it a day or so later, and that's Cheney Johnson. He is the UAH transfer, 6'7", 215 pounds, of Thompson High School, in Alabaster, Alabama. Last year for UAH, he averaged 13.7 points per game, 53% shooting from field goal percent shooting, and 37% from the 3-point line. This is an opportunity for him to actually, he was part of UAH when Auburn had an exhibition game last year in which he picked up 14 points in that game, if I'm not mistaken. So Auburn has definitely been exposed to him. He had an opportunity to come down, like what he saw, and now is joining this new revamped roster. Ike, talk to me, man. What was your initial thoughts with this kid? What's weird about him is you see his height there, but they're mentioning that he will likely play the 4 or 3 if needed. What did you see of him? Because you've had a chance to watch some of him over the past few days. How was UAH using him, and how was he playing? What was his game like?
He was at UAH strictly in the post. Like, he would step out and shoot threes occasionally, and he shot somewhere around like 37% from 3 for his career there. Had a rough season last year, sub 30% shooting last year, but he was over 35% for his career at UAH. But he was mostly used as a post player. He was a power forward / center for them because of the league that they played in, the height that he was going up against. So he, for me, translates to kind of how Jalen Williams was being used for Auburn, where he's going to be a, duck into the post mid-range, and his mid-range is good. Now, Jalen Williams had the little, he's left-handed, so a left hand, kind of flip / hook turn over the shoulder kind of thing. Cheney is more of a, if you guys remember kind of how, I'm gonna say remember as if it's not lore, how Jabari Smith was, where he was more of a fadeaway, back to the basket, turn over either shoulder, fadeaway mid-range shooter. That's more of Cheney Johnson's game. He's not really kind of the get into the lane, quick little floater or hook shot over either shoulder. He's more turn and shoot a pure turnaround jump shot over either shoulder guy in the lane. He is not like like a leaper, but he can of course dunk at 6'7". But his game is smooth though. It's actually a little smoother than Jalen's is from a ball handling standpoint. Jalen's not really a put the ball on the basket. This kid Cheney can catch the ball at the 3-point line, give you the triple threat, get to the lane kind of movements. He ain't got like no bag where he's like crossing dudes up or anything like that. He ain't like wiggling, but first step, get past you, get downhill, finish fairly well in the lane as well. He doesn't finish and we'll look at some film on this when I get it cut up on him. Doesn't finish particularly well through contact. So he is going to need to bulk up and really kind of, for him to be a post player, he got knocked off of his square a
at
little
this
bit.
level.
Yeah, so if he's going to play in the post at this level, he's going to need to bulk up a little bit. Probably needs to do some more conditioning. He played heavy minutes for them. He was a 25 to 27 minute per game guy for them. Probably not going to play that heavy minutes against us. So hopefully less minutes, but same type of effort. You're going to get better returns on a per minute basis for him. So I expect his usage rate to probably go down, but his efficiency rate to go up if he's going to be playing with us. So we'll see.
How does this factor in with Jalen Williams, who also was announced last week that he was uh, entering the NBA draft, but of course the option to return based on the feedback that he receives from the league.
Yeah.
What do you think Bruce Pearl and company is thinking with this?
I think that they're hoping Jalen returns and Cheney is a guy that will be playing minutes. So you don't lose anything when you pull Jalen off the floor, right? So if you think about it last year, and this is something that I remarked on, people feel like our problem last year was our guard play. And I honestly feel like the bigger problem for us was at the 4 or 5 spot. Because when Jalen went off the floor, you didn't really have another person who was like Jalen to bring into the game,
Hmm.
right? You were hoping that guy, when you started the season out,
Traore.
was going to be Johan, right? You were
Yeah.
hoping Johan Traore was going to be your kind of smaller forward that could come in and play the 4 position, right? Like if we're talking about projecting to the NBA, Jalen Williams is a 3, right? He's a 6'6", 6'7" guy, but he doesn't play like a 3. He plays like a 4, right? And so you were hoping Traore was going to be that guy he's taller, right? 6'10". So you were, 6'9", 6'10". So you were hoping you're going to bring more length in with the same kind of athleticism. I think Cheney Johnson projects to be a solid backup for Jalen Williams at the 4 spot if I were making a guess about it. Now they have him again as potentially playing some 3. I don't see that being favorable for him. I don't see him being a starting 3 at this level right now. So with the Jalen Williams situation, I'm hoping Jalen comes back. Cheney's a plug and play guy right behind him. You get hopefully Janai back, and then you still have Cardwell as another 5 in there. Then you just got to figure out what you're going to do at the 3 position, right? And we're going to talk about some guys that potentially could transfer over here in a minute. But with the status of Allen Flanigan still up in the air, today's the last day that he could potentially even declare for the NBA draft. You don't really know what you have at your small forward / big guard position, right? As a combo guard.
Yeah, and that's something to consider too.
I mean, you still have Simo on the team, right? Who started out the season as a starter, but
yeah,
I don't know, right?
Well, but I just think the direction that Bruce Pearl and company is going with this team, you like what Simo brings in terms of his
For sure.
the dirty work and the hustle plays that he makes. So there is a place for him on this team.
Yeah, for
but
sure.
If you're trying to bulk up your production from the small 4 position, yeah, you're definitely looking at some guys who are out in the portal right now, namely a guy who was on Texas Tech's team while Corey Williams was there as an assistant, Jalen Tyson. So your thoughts on him? And I believe does he have a visit locked in?
Tyson is supposed to be there today, according to what I read earlier this week, that he had a visit locked in for today. No, that wasn't him. That was the Cincinnati kid that we're talking about in football. Tyson,
I think
he has some interest from Auburn. I don't think he's locked in a date though.
Okay. But there is Matthew Cleveland from Florida State who recently named Auburn in his top 3. Auburn joins, I believe it's Miami, and I can't think of the other school.
Missouri, I think, is the third one.
Missouri, you got it. Missouri, Miami, and Auburn.
I think Missouri's leading right now for Matthew Cleveland.
Yeah. So Yeah, so we'll keep an eye on that, and if things heat up with Jalen Tyson. But your thoughts on those guys, Ike? I don't know if you've managed to kind of pay attention to Cleveland or even Tyson.
The only thing I've seen from either of those guys has been highlight films. As you guys know, I don't spend a ton of time trying to break down film for guys who have not committed to Auburn, because I just there's too much other stuff that I could use my time to do. So I've looked at some highlight stuff. What I like from Cleveland, really quick release. He is a scorer, right? Like he can definitely put the ball in the basket, all three levels score from what I saw. Um, Defensively, he looked solid in the highlights as well. I think the kid from Texas Tech is a little more of a slasher than he is a outside shooter. I think Cleveland is more of an outside shooter than a slasher. But I'd take either of those guys, to be honest with you, just from looking at highlight stuff. Now, again, I need to go back and do a more exhaustive look at their film and kind of see some of the things that they struggle with. And I think that's a big thing that people have to remember. Like a lot of people evaluate based on, and I've said this a lot of times about all sport. People evaluate how good someone can be based upon their highlight film, and of course, you're going to see all the good stuff from their highlights. But you really need to go watch how they play. Um, just up and down the floor, see how they move defensively, all of those things to project whether or not they fit well into what you guys want to do. And so, yeah, I don't have a ton of stuff to point out for either of those guys because I've only watched highlights. But from an athleticism standpoint, I like what both of them could bring.
Is Do you think Auburn finds another center?
I
In
think Auburn needs to find another center. Like I've been on record as saying that I think that um, that you could move Janai Broom to the fore and bring in a true shot blocking center. And I know a lot of people disagree with me on that as far as his athleticism and his quickness. But it honestly it depends on the tempo and rate of play that we want to play next season, right? If we want to go to a more slow it down, like really muddy up the game type of thing like we did last year, then you can go and get a bigger guy as long as he can move and you'll be fine. But I think that we need a better shot blocker in order to play the type of defense that Coach Pearl wants to play, where you want to play this frantic pace out front, run guys off the 3-point line. You got to funnel them to a shot blocker. And
right,
Janai Broom is a good, not great shot blocker. I think you just need a guy who is more of what Walker Kessler was for us 2 years ago, who is just kind of a wall down front. And if he doesn't block it, he's altering it and can stay out of foul trouble. If you're not going to do that, then the four that you bring in needs to be somebody who can stretch the floor and really make the other teams have a significant mismatch. Um, Honestly, you know what player in Auburn history of recent history would be a perfect guy to bring in on this team?
who's that?
Anthony McLemore.
Yeah,
McLemore would be the
yeah,
perfect
for
kind
sure,
of
for sure. He was an
tweener.
enforcer
Yeah,
kind of
he
guy.
he was a
Yeah,
tweener kind of forward guy. He was just lengthy, but he could step out and shoot. And he could run the floor really well. He's the kind of guy I think that puts you in a place where you can be up and down, and he's not necessarily gonna but he's just gonna be in where he needs to be. Really smart player. I think an Anthony McLemore type of player would fit really well on this roster.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Let's get into some of you guys' comments before we get to the break here. Mystic Wanderer says, "Appreciate you being with us, man." Says Corey Williams is a home run hire, in my opinion. Even if we lose Phylon, I believe Williams will bring in some big dogs. Which is a pretty good point here because I'm pretty sure there's some guys who he's been after and he's been recruiting for a while. So even
Right.
if I don't think it's a net loss or just we're just out of it for anyone at that position. I'm sure he has some relationships. Auburn is a very big quality program, so I'm pretty sure he can bring someone in even if we don't get Fallon. So a good comment, good point there, Mystic. He also comes back and says Cheney needs to get his weight up. Some time in the weight room will help. So he actually agrees with your sentiment, Ike. Wesley Hilson, appreciate you watching with us. Does Denver float between a 2 and a 3?
If you're going to go small, right? Denver's 6'4", right? So if you're going to play a 6'4" 3, right? Because that's, they've got him, they have Chris Moore listed as 6'6". He's probably more 6'4", 6'5" guy. So we're already playing somebody that size. He's more of a scorer, but where I would worry, and worries a big is he's not like a rebounder like that. He's not the gritty kind of Chris Moore type. And that's the other thing that you have to think about if you're going to put in a lineup that can score and you want to go small, right? Like you could go Trey Donaldson, Aiden Holloway at your 1-2, flip those back and forth, or, KD, Trey, Aiden, right? Like mix and match those guys at 1-2, and then you get to a 3 with Denver. And you could go 4 with a Cheney Johnson and 5 with a Janai, right? Like you could put in a small lineup like that, and you'd be able to get up and down the floor. You'd be able to push tempo. You'd be able to do some really creative things with that kind of lineup. But who's going to be a rebounder on that team? Cheney Johnson, Janai Broom could definitely get you some rebounds out of that, but you get probably no rebounding out of your top 3 in that lineup.
Right.
Defensively, you're going to be mismatched. Offensively, you're going to give people problems because you're going to be quick and you're going to be able to do a lot of stuff. And you can do a lot of switching out front defensively. I just don't know how he translates on the defensive end at the 3, depending upon what the matchup is, right? If you're going against a team like last year's Missouri team that's going to try out a 3-guard lineup, essentially a 4 or 5 guard lineup with how they like to play, then you could play that kind of small ball with them. It just kind of depends. So maybe, yes, maybe the answer to that question is maybe.
Also, French Taylor, appreciate the super sticker. And he comes back and says, War Eagle, the War Rapport, love your content.
Appreciate that.
Appreciate you hanging with us, as well as the super chat. Good conversation. We're going to get to the break. Those of you watching on Facebook, we encourage you at this moment to migrate over to YouTube, because we'll still be streaming. We've got lots to talk about in the transfer portal as it pertains to football. You don't want to miss that conversation. For those who are watching, share this content on social media, Facebook, Twitter. Use the hashtag even at us. Smash that like button on the video. Help us out with the YouTube algorithm, and subscribe if you are new to the channel. Let's pay some bills and acknowledge our sponsors.
This edition of the War Report is made possible by our generous sponsors. AuburnSports.com. For news and notes on all things Auburn sports, head over to AuburnSports.com. Athletic Architects. For young athletes looking to secure their financial futures, let Athletic Architects help you start to build your financial house. Head over to BuildTheHouse.com. And our giveaway sponsor, GWT2 Energy Consulting Services. If you want the best in the business at restaurant logistics, check out our friends at GWT2Energy.com.
As always, a big thank you to the sponsors of the War Report, and thank you to the War Report family that gets the green names flowing in the chat every single week. We appreciate all of you. If you want to join the green name game, head on over to where that join button resides on your phone or whatever device you are using. Click join and decide which level you would like access. We have some really great things coming up this summer that we want to introduce for our members. More on that to come. But for right now, film review. We are heavy in the film review. So I'm going to be dropping a lot of film for you guys. I teased a little bit of it. I've got some film on both Denver Jones and Cheney Johnson that's going to be coming up for our basketball folks. So make sure you get locked in with that. A lot more 8A football film review to come. So you got to be a member to be a part of that whole situation. Make sure you go ahead and get that membership secured. If you are a member, you want to gift a membership, you guys know you can do that right now from the live chat area. Gifting memberships is super easy, and it's a way for other people to be able to experience 1 month of free membership on you. We're giving away stuff. Hashtag get your weight up in the comments to be able to get your name entered into the chat, or for a chance to win this AU t-shirt sponsored by GWT2 Energy. That is our guy, Walt Taylor. We appreciate him as always. So hashtag get your weight up. We'll be doing the drawing here in about 20 minutes or so. If you like listening and want to be hands-free, Podcast is the way to go. We are on all podcast platforms as the Auburn Express, powered by the War Rapport. Some of that stuff is audio only, so you only can hear it on podcasts. I'm talking about Amen Corner. I'm talking about Mike Mack and the Means. I'm talking about Lobtown. We've got great content that you can only hear on podcasts. Make sure you're locked in with us as the Auburn Express, powered by the War Rapport.
Let's switch gears and begin to talk some football. There's a transfer portal that's open in that sport as well. It's been open for what, 2 weeks now? Has it been about 2 weeks? Has it been 2 weeks or has it been a week?
The
Week or
transfer
2
portal.
weeks?
Yeah, I think like 2 weeks now. The
About
transfer.
2
I mean,
weeks
well,
now.
the portal's been open, but like I think the official whatever that Friday was is when it like people will officially enter their names for sure. Yeah. So it's been maybe like a week and a half or something like that. I don't know.
Here's an opportunity for us to kind of take kind of a pseudo victory lap, if you will. We have cautioned Auburn fans about this transfer portal
Mm-hmm.
in that there may be quantity, but not necessarily quality as it pertains to certain positions of need and the caliber of players who will be entering the portal in order to fill those needs, namely positions like quarterback, even offensive line to that extent. Um, it hasn't been pretty comparable to the first portal opening that we had a few months back. Kind of talk about that, Ike. Obviously, you're not surprised as you kind of suspected that it would kind of be this way. What are your thoughts on it? Do you expect as some people's springs begin to come to a close, they begin to have, because I think that's another thing to keep in mind too. Some people's spring camps are just now starting to end.
Right.
So it's likely we'll see some action in the next few days or the next week or so with the transfer portal. But your thoughts on what we've seen in terms of guys jumping into the portal?
I mean, there's a lot of guys in there, but you know, you've already said it. I don't know how many quality guys, and again, when I say quality, I'm talking about you have guys on your team that are good, maybe not great, that are sitting on your bench for depth. And those are the guys that are most likely to hit the portal, the guys who are later in their playing career, who haven't had an opportunity to hit the field, and are looking for an opportunity elsewhere. If you lose those guys, you're going to backfill them with guys that are pretty much in that same situation. It is during this portal period. So, you know, hear me well, those who like to come into the comment section after videos and try to have conversations about this, not understanding the context of this conversation. I'm talking specifically about the spring portal period, the one that we're in right now. It is not likely that you're going to find a bunch of difference makers during this. Not impossible. Didn't say it would never happen. It's unlikely. So hanging your hat on some portal hero happening during this period, not as likely. Now, there are some guys who are in situations that Auburn fans can talk themselves into. Well, this guy should leave because he's talented and he's not going to be the starter there. That doesn't mean that that guy wants to do that, right? So there's a lot of circumstances around why guys would stay put in situations where they're not going to be the starter. And we've seen that happen so far. Like a lot of guys that people, even to the point of like some of the guys in the SEC that people have talked about who during this portal period that we couldn't even sign and have play in the fall, they haven't jumped in the portal. A lot of people were talking about one of the quarterbacks from Ole Miss potentially leaving. This just doesn't make sense for any of those guys. People talking about the quarterback room at Georgia. None of those guys hopped in the portal, right? Like there just aren't a lot of advantageous situations for people jumping in the portal at this point in time that are also attractive for the teams who that they could potentially go and play for. So I'm not telling people not to be excited about whatever. I'm just saying temper your expectations a little bit about what you're going to be able to bring in during this portal period that's going to be transformative for whatever room you feel like you're deficient in. If you feel like we need more help at the edge, so edge is one of those groups, I think, where you can go get a pass rush specialist and bring him into your squad and he can make a difference and get on the field, right? Wide receiver, potentially, right? Because skill players are misevaluated way more than anything else. Hard to do that at offensive line, hard to do that at quarterback. And those are the two places where I think a lot of people are hoping we get some people in. But edge and wide receiver, you could potentially raise the floor in some of your rooms, right? But we don't have a ton of scholarships left available, and we haven't had a ton of guys jump in the portal from Auburn yet, right? So
Right.
there's got to be roster room as well.
Let's talk about that, Ike. Are you surprised at the number of guys from Auburn that have entered the portal? I expected there to be more at this
Yes.
point in this time. So, what do you make of that?
I don't know. I mean, we have lamented some of the messaging that has come out, at least publicly, from Coach Freeze in regard to the talent that exists in his rooms. But there haven't been a lot of guys who have stepped into the portal as of yet. Maybe it's one of those situations where they were waiting until this last round of spring games happens to kind of see if some of the programs where they've been trying to, feel out, we're going to have room for them and see who exited from the programs once they started doing that. Maybe we'll see a pickup in this next. I expect the portal to go nuts this week, honestly. But the question is whether or not some of those guys from Auburn are going to go ahead and put their hat in there. I would have thought.
You would think they would know where they stood by now.
Yeah, I would have thought that there would have been more movement right now. So that tells me a couple of things. The prospects for some of those guys might not be as good. And with those prospects, you have to look at a lot of things like, you could go and play somewhere else. And I do think that if you're being honest with yourself, you might take a hit as far as what your day-to-day NIL situation might look like, but film is most important if the NFL is what you want to do in the future. Taking a small paycheck right now, though it might be beneficial to you financially today and is better than nothing, is not the bet on yourself I think that some of these athletes should take, and saying, hey, it's better for me to go get film somewhere, even if that means I'm going to take a step down into a different, smaller conference, smaller league, go ball out for a couple of years, become a grad transfer, or put some dynamic film on where people are actually looking at me to be a draft pick from a smaller school. I think that that's a better long-term bet. But hasn't happened so far for a lot of these guys, and I'm not mad about it. I'm not as down on our roster and our talent as some fans are. But hey, and it's probably more so because I just don't know what's out there to bring in to replace the guys if they leave. So we'll see. But I have been surprised at the low number of portal guys thus far that have entered from Auburn.
Let's grab Alex Wilson. Appreciate you, man, commenting in the super chat. He asked, how do y'all feel about getting another outside linebacker? Now, Auburn has offered Anthony Campbell, who's outside linebacker, but I think he may project as an edge. He entered the portal from Louisiana Monroe. Also, Jaheim Thomas, that's the guy who we was talking about, Ike,
From Cincinnati,
who's from Cincinnati, 6'4", 245 pounds. Last year had 25 solo tackles and 2 sacks. Is expected to arrive in Auburn today and stay through Tuesday. He's another outside linebacker guy who could also project and play the edge position. Many people have kind of talked about the guy out of Washington, Savell Smalls. Haven't heard much about him or Auburn's interest in him since he entered the portal. So these are a few names to make note of who are in the portal, who I think would be interesting fits for Auburn. 2 of the guys that I've mentioned, Auburn has already made contact with and has either offered or they've either visited campus. Yeah. So your thoughts on the edge position, Ike, in terms of what Auburn's likely to get and just bulk up and get depth. I think you need depth for that position anyway, because of the past 2 seasons. We've seen what injuries can do to the depth of that position. So you need bodies regardless.
Yeah. I mean, I think with the exodus of Jeffrey Emba, who's not really an edge, but a guy who was playing defensive end for Auburn, you're going to need guys who can set the edge or be outside players. And you need a pass rush specialist. Like, you need a guy who it's 3rd and long, and he's going to come into the game and the defense has to tilt in their direction. We don't know whether or not Keldrick Falk is that guy yet. I think that there's a lot of hope that he can be, but you need 1 or 2 of them, right? From your from what you said specifically, injury, right? Like, Echo Leota was going to be that guy for us last year. He got hurt, and we struggled to replace that last season. And if you look at the dynamic Auburn defenses, Um, even with um, guys that were monsters on the interior, those defenses just were never as good without the guy on the edge.
Right.
The
Right.
guy on the edge changes. Like you need the interior guys to be run stoppers, and interior pass rushers are irreplaceable. Like if you can find an interior pass rusher, a guy that can put pressure up the middle without having to bring blitzes, then that is that's gold.
You're right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
but
Absolutely.
edge players that put those tackles in a situation where you need to bring a running back to chip, you're going to have to chip with a tight end, change the complexion of defenses immensely, because when you get into those situations where you're going to be in third and long, 3rd and 7 or more, being able to bring that pressure off of the edge, um, it's invaluable, man. Especially if you can do that without having to blitz a guy, right? Like that's why you saw that LSU defense change when Perkins emerged on that defense. Like that defense was fundamentally different with Perkins out there being somebody who you had to figure out where he was every single down. Um, that's why what's the kid's name from Bama? Um,
Oh, I know you're talking about.
I don't
I don't think
I
about
try
that.
to erase Bama players from my memory as quickly as possible, but like, that's why their defense could be what it was when his productivity was down. The Bama defense wasn't as good, right? It just when you have a dynamic
Will
guy.
Anderson.
Thank you. When you have a dynamic guy on the edge, it changes the complexion of a defense, man. It just absolutely does. It means your cornerbacks can play a little bit more risky. It means that your linebackers can be a lot more free. It means your blitz packages are way different, right?
Well, you think about our defensive coordinator, what he wants to do. He
Mhm.
needs a guy at that position
Right.
who gives him the flexibility to kind of run his system, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that edge is that what they call the jack position in this defense is that and the jack and the star.
Those are the two most important
Yeah,
positions. Yeah.
the jack and the star are what allow you to be flexible, because you just never know who's coming on a given down to bring pressure. You never really know what they're going to do with those two guys, whether they're dropping back in coverage, right? Like you could do a 3 down front, and then your star and your jack can kind of trade places on who's coming on any given down. You could bring both of them. You could drop both of them. You could bring an into like it makes you so flexible when you don't know what those two guys are going to do, because they're both linebacker types. One of them tends to be bigger, more defensive line. The other one tends to be smaller, more cornerback like. But it brings flexibility to your defense, and it causes offenses to have to figure out what you're doing way differently. So super crucial to have dynamic guys at those two positions.
Uh, Quick question here coming out from Brian Hancher. He says, "How realistic is it to expect Falk to be an impact player this year?"
He's built like he could be impact day one, right? The question is whether or not he understands the defense at a fundamental level. And at this level, you're like at the level where what he was doing in high school, he could win with speed and power over just about anybody. You're not going to win everything with speed and power at this level. I don't know how quick he is, but if he's got one or two moves that he can go to, uh and he's got the speed, right? Like you have to, everything from the edge sets up with speed, right? Like you just
Yeah.
can't win with power a lot on edge. So if you've got speed to be able to bend the corner and really put that tackle on its heels, the question then becomes, do you have a good counter? So for one season as a freshman coming in with nobody having tape on him, he could come back and be an impact guy. You'll find out if he's getting heavy minutes by about game 6 or 7 whether or not that was a flash in the pan, because you'll have played 3 cupcakes in those first 4 games, and he might look dynamic, but you'll be into the meat of your SEC schedule by game 6, 7, right? And so that's when you'll really know what you have in Keldrick Falk, because he'll have played some SEC caliber tackles out there. But year 2 is really where you're going to know whether or not he is an NFL caliber guy, because they'll have tape
Right.
on him. They'll have figured it out. Okay, we need to figure out what to do against this guy. Is he going to have a counter?
Right.
And if he has a counter, he's going to be a problem, right? If he can win with speed and power, but he can hit you with a counter move, he could be dangerous. So yes, I think that, by game 7, we'll know what we have in Falk for sure. if he gets the minutes.
Let's go ahead. Some of you guys have comments about other topics that relate to the transfer portal. We can get to that. The first comment here comes from Chad Smith, who asked, "What's up with Grayson McCall?" We talked about him last week during the midweek report, so we don't have to spend a lot of time here. We do what we've heard, or what the tea leaves have been indicating is that some things have kind of picked up with him. It seems like he may have been a lost cause, but it looks like there is a possibility he can transfer. I believe this summer, Ike. So depending on where Auburn is, if they are still interested, I know a lot of beat writers and reporters from Florida seem to be pretty jazzed about kind of the turn of events with Grayson McCall. So it looks like he may still be in play for Auburn, should Auburn stay or remain interested in him. That's all we know. As more details about that unfold, we will be right here to cover that.
Yeah.
Greg Wheatley says, Arch Manning must think very highly of himself if he thinks he can start right out of high school. Well, listen, he's had a lot of people big his head up because he's been really hyped even in his recruitment. So I can understand why he may even think that way. So he was always listed as the one, the next coming. So I understand how he probably feels he can start or should start wherever he is. So I haven't heard of anything with him in the portal. I think he's number 3 on the depth chart at Texas. But they got some guys in front of him. So I mean, and their head coach is a QB guy. So you there's going to be competition in his rooms, regardless of wherever he is. So there's a lot of guys who feel just like you. That's why they compete. Oda Smith, appreciate you commenting with us, man. You've been commenting a lot. Appreciate you being with us today. Wide receiver Lorenzo Styles from Notre Dame. Wide receiver Jordan Hudson from TCU. This is a name I just recently heard of, Jordan Hudson. QB Ben Finley from NC State. Wide receiver Brennan Thompson from Texas are some names that he's excited about. Jordan Hudson is like 6'1". He still kind of shows as kind of a slot guy. I don't know if has Auburn shown interest in him? Do we know?
They have actually shown some interest. He's heard from Auburn already. I think that's more of a backfill for Dawson, who just exited, right? Like, you've got 2 dynamic slot guys in Javarius Johnson and Jay Fair, but it doesn't hurt to have a third guy. I think the big thing for Auburn is they want some more speed at the wide receiver position. Right now, we've got when you think about, just think about our wide receivers, right? Camden Brown, not particularly fast. Omari Kelly, not particularly fast. Coy Moore, not particularly fast. Landon King, not particularly fast. Right. Nick Mardner, not particularly fast.
Right.
You really only have 2 guys in that room who are burners, Jay Fair and Javarius Johnson. That's it. Now, you're going to get Sori, who's coming in during the fall, who is absolutely got top end speed. And his name has escaped me. The kid from Lochapoka, who could play DB or wide receiver, probably will play wide receiver for us.
Oh, yeah, I know you're talking about.
But that's where you're going to get speed there. But the question for those guys is picking up the system quickly enough to get minutes, right? So true freshmen coming in, picking up that system, not as easy. So you want to have another guy who can bring you some speed. So because we don't have a ton of speed, JC Hart, thank you so much for the chat, guys. Because we don't have a lot of speed, I do anticipate us actually playing 2 tight ends a little bit more than what you've seen in the past from a Hugh Freeze offense, because Rivaldo Fairweather does give you some speed from that position to be able to play an inside guy, which would be a slot. So you could have Rivaldo Fairweather and another tight end in there as a blocker, and you'd be able to still run 3 receiver concepts by sliding Fairweather out into a slot type of thing. And then you could run 4 receiver concepts with Fairweather as your 4th receiver and still have a tight end in there, potentially, right? So So it's 2 tight ends, but you're going to run a 4 wide concept by sliding your tight end out into a slot receiver type package. I do anticipate us doing that early in the season while we're trying to bring some folks along, if we cannot go and get a 4th receiver, because that's really more of a depth thing, right? Because if Johnson, you got Malcolm Johnson Jr. coming back, who's a speed guy. I don't want to forget him in that room. But if if VAR or Jay Fair go down at some point in time, you don't have any speed in that room anymore. You just don't. Not enough to run four receipt, not enough to run four wide, which I know this coaching staff wants to. So again, I expect more two tight end packages, Fairweather being split out wide as a split end to be able to substitute for doing that. But that's why I would expect a guy like the TCU receiver to get a look from this staff, is to be able to bring somebody in familiar with this type of system with some speed.
Yeah. All right. Let's see here. What do we have? Tumors Corner says, I don't know about y'all, but it seems Auburn fans want another QB. I'm more like we are good with what we got. Here's what I would say, Ike, before I let you answer. I think Auburn needs another QB, just because I'm not quite sure. Again, we've kind of assumed that he's more likely to leave once he graduates, and that's TJ Finley. That
Mhm.
puts you at Robbie Ashford, who has struggled with his health,
Mhm.
and Holden Gerner, who's only played 2-3 snaps total. In
I
a
think he has
completely
5 total snaps,
yeah.
something like that.
So in a new system,
Right.
completely different system that he wasn't originally recruited for, you need another guy.
Yeah.
And even with
Hank
Hugh
Brown would be
Freeze,
the only other guy that would be in there.
and
Right.
I don't think you want to play a true freshman under these circumstances in which Hugh Freeze is trying to win now.
Right.
So he wants a guy who's familiar with his system, who can at least bring some competition to that room. Right. That's typically what you're looking for there. So I think it was even alarming, even during spring, when we saw that Robbie Ashford was kind of held out of some practices due to some soreness in his shoulder. We know he's going to be running a good bit in the fall and during the season, where he's no longer wearing that orange jersey. He's a live player who can get hit at any given moment. So you need some bodies in that room. So I think the coaching staff understands that. And I think they're going to see who they can bring in. But your thoughts, Ike?
Yeah, I think just from like you said, a body standpoint, you have to go get a quarterback. Who that quarterback is going to be and the caliber of that quarterback. So I'm going to go back to what I just said about basketball and the whole situation around LeBaron and Phylon. And it is how much eligibility that quarterback has that you bring in is going to have a lot to do with how you can recruit for that position in the future.
Right.
So if you go and get a guy, like I've seen a lot of people clamoring for um, the kid from NC State at quarterback, right? He's got like 2 or 3 years of eligibility left. Um, there was another one recently that I saw some people clamoring for. He was a redshirt freshman. And I can't remember who it was, but I saw some people talking about they wanted to bring him in. If you bring in
You talking about Bishop Davenport?
yes,
Bishop
if you bring
Davenport from Utah State.
Utah State, that's exactly who it is. If you bring in a kid like Davenport from Utah State, who's a redshirt freshman right now, why would Holden Gerner stay on your team? They're both redshirt freshmen. Why would you stay? I don't see a point in bringing in somebody with that much eligibility left, unless you're saying to Holden, dude, you're not it. And so you're gonna if you bring him in, you probably lose 2 QBs during this period. You're gonna
Finley
lose
and Gerner.
TJ, yeah. So that kind of handcuffs you from the standpoint of what do you do to preserve your QB room for the guys that you think are going to stay with Robbie Ashford and Holden Gerner. Um, and it means that you're going to be looking at a guy who's a rising junior, senior grad transfer. Like it puts you in that space of who you can go and get and still preserve that. And then you got to think about, you got Walker White coming in next year, who maybe not playing as a true freshman, but will likely be your incumbent redshirt freshman guy that's going to be coming in. So Holden Gerner's like, he doesn't have a shot if you bring in a guy with like 2 or 3 years of eligibility. A grad transfer is this perfect spot. Guy with 1 year, come in, start immediately, and then you have a QB competition going with Robbie and Holden going into the next season. And then, if Holden loses that QB competition, he's probably out of here, right? But if you go and get a guy with multiple years of eligibility and expected to be who just needed 1 good year to go to the league, you likely lose Holden in that spot as well, right? So they're in a very tenuous position right now as a coaching staff to try to figure out a guy who's talented enough to raise the floor in your room, and a guy who is not got so much eligibility that he pushes another guy out the door.
Right. Also, too, that brings us to Ben Bryant, who's another transfer out of Cincinnati.
Brent Bryant's the
6'3".
right kind of eligibility guy, right?
Yeah. That brings us right to him. Now, last year, Ike, he completed 61% of his pass attempts for 2,732 yards, 21 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. But he's not the most mobile of a QB. He actually lost his job to Emory Jones, which kind of put a foul taste in a lot of people's mouth who was looking at him.
Right.
But he does have the option to return to Cincy. He's just putting his name out there in the transfer portal for now, just to kind of see if he's able to garner some interest. But those are some of his stats, some of his numbers. Again, he fits the type of QB that you would go for. Right. Not much eligibility and a guy who could lift the room there. But is he the guy that Hugh Freeze is looking for? I don't know the answer to that. If I had to guess, I would say no.
He hasn't offered him yet, right? And so, I think that says a lot about it. But he's got enough experience starting out there, put up enough big numbers. The completion percentage is not high, but it's not terribly low either. Again, he's a sweet spot kind of guy that you can bring in. But the question for Ben Bryant is, does he want to come in and then lose another? Like, he wants to. So that's the kind of the other problem that you introduce with where you are right now. He's a guy that's going to want to come in and start somewhere wherever he goes. He doesn't want to go sit. He can go sit. He can stay at Cincinnati and sit the bench
for that, right?
Sure. So is he going to go somewhere and be a backup? He needs to go somewhere where he feels like he can legitimately compete for a starting job this year, because it's the last year that he has of eligibility. So he's the right eligibility spot for this team, but he's not a home run by any means. But and this is, again, this is what I keep trying to say to people. During this portal period, you're in a very tough spot. You're in a super tough spot, specifically from the quarterback's position, because of where you have to play this game with eligibility left. So again, I'll say this again. Whoever you bring in, whether they've got multiple years of eligibility or not, needs to be somebody who is draftable, right? Like, they need to be someone who, with a good year at Auburn, can go get drafted next year. That would put you in a perfect spot, a 1-year stopgap quarterback who can come in, start next year, and hit the draft, or graduate. They either need to graduate or hit the draft.
Yeah, that guy needed to already be on campus, though.
And that's hard to get during that. That's all I'm trying to say to people.
That guy needed to be in the winter portal as opposed to the spring portal.
It's hard to get that guy during this session, because if he was 1 year away from getting drafted, maybe it was the wrong situation. But it's hard to do that during this portal period, to have a guy with the requisite amount of eligibility to not threaten your incumbent guys of Robbie Ashford / Holden Geriner, and not be in a place where you threaten what you have with Walker White coming in the next year, right? Like, you're in a because as much as people forget about him, I haven't seen him throw a lot. Hank Brown is still a scholarship quarterback that's coming in here in this coming fall period. I'd have to imagine he's at least decent, or Hugh Freeze wouldn't have offered him again after he left from Liberty, right? Like, he's got to be at least decent. So if he's good, Holden Geriner's got to be sitting there like, if he comes in and lights it up in the fall, Holden's gone. Let me say that to you 100%. He's gone.
Well, let me ask you this then, Ike. If you get a Bishop Davenport, are you already thinking as a coaching staff, I need to bring in another person as well? Like Bishop Davenport can't be the only QB I'm bringing in, because I already know.
Oh yeah, he's got to get
I'm net one. Yeah. If I bring him in, because I'm likely to lose 2 QBs and a true freshman coming in behind Robbie Ashford, who we're praying he can be healthy throughout the season, right?
Yeah.
So you almost, if you go with a Bishop Davenport, assuming that they pursue him, you're going into it with the notion that this is one of two QBs I'm likely bringing in.
Correct. Yeah, you have to bring in two. And I see people still bringing up McCall. McCall's not in the transfer portal right now, guys. Like that's wishful thinking. Great. McCall meets every single criteria I just named.
He would be a home
not
run
in the portal.
He'd be home, and this is what for me. You've already mentioned your reservations. We're relying on situations that are outside of Auburn's control
Correct.
to line up. If that wasn't a factor, he'd be here. We wouldn't even be talking about the QB position potentially, right? Yeah. So for us to depend on that in the 9th hour, if it works out, let's throw a War Rapport party about McCall. I'm here to celebrate with you guys. Hey, y'all were right. Y'all called it. I just think this coaching staff needs to kind of really work with what they got and pray that the heavens open up and drop McCall into our lap.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really, again, he is the perfect person because Grayson McCall, one good year, is going to the NFL because he doesn't have any more eligibility. Like, he's got to come ball out for you, right?
He has a track record of playing well.
Yeah. So again, I get it. I get why people are attracted to him as a potential guy to come in and solidify this QB room in year one, but he's got to graduate. And that is not getting. And if I'm Coach Hugh Freeze, I can't put all my eggs in this maybe basket over here. I've got to go evaluate guys that I think I can bring in right now.
100%.
And so monitoring that situation closely. Here's the thing. If you go get a transfer guy and bring him in and he is a solid backup, you still can go get Grayson McCall and bring him in if he finishes, right? But I think in the short term, they've got to be looking at somebody who could potentially come and compete right now. And I mean, you can't sell them hoop dreams, right? But they've got to be in a position where they're not waiting to see if Grayson McCall is going to be available and not, saying to themselves, I know Robbie Ashford's going to be ready. Like you got to go get an insurance policy, in my opinion. Now, TJ Finley is his insurance policy right now. Let's be clear about that. TJ Finley's the insurance policy, but that policy is expiring soon. That he was your spring insurance policy, so you could have the requisite number of guys in there to throw and run all your stuff. But that policy is expiring soon. The question is, do you want to renew that policy or do you want to go get a new policy?
If you listen to a lot of folks, they ready to move on from that. And I'm not sure. I mean, again, TJ Finley he said some things after spring, more than one occasion that has left me wondering.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, honestly, man,
I don't know if you really you're saying the right things, but I don't know. Push comes to shove, you really want to be at Auburn.
Correct. I don't see him staying based upon things that he said, the trajectory of where I see things going. But again, the place that you're in this delicate balancing act is you need a QB with very limited number of years of eligibility left that can come in and start, because you're going to run into the same problem Ole Miss ran into last year, which is you brought in Jackson Dart with a bunch of years of eligibility. And if he doesn't work out, you've got essentially a dead scholarship sitting on your QB roster, because Jackson Dart can't transfer anywhere until he graduates. And then they went in the very next year and brought in another transfer QB to compete with him who has limited eligibility. And you're going to be in that same position in your QB room here if you don't get this QB situation right during the offseason. And it's hard. It's not like, again, there's no magic bullet that fixes this other than a Grayson McCall type walking into the transfer portal or graduating.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
Yeah, it's again, I'll say this. I will be happy to throw a Grayson McCall party. He lands at Auburn. But again, for situations that's been outside of Hugh Freeze and Auburn's control, he's not here. And until that lines up, he likely won't be here. So that's my thoughts on it. Again, if he ends up at Auburn, we'll all throw a War Rapport party, and everyone's invited who wants to be there. We have a few more comments. Alan Berry, we see your super chat that you're asked. We will get to all of these after our drawing. We are about to draw for an AU t-shirt courtesy of GWT2 Energy Consulting Services. You need to do right now is drop hashtag get your weight up. Some of you guys have been doing that throughout the show. So do it now. As a matter of fact, I'm giving you some time. Ike has actually been real just generous because he's been struggling to get the screen up for
I'll
us.
say I don't know that I hit the collect button because I only see 9 names in here right now. So y'all got time.
So go ahead. All right. So let me bring it up again. This is a gift from Ike because usually we would know who won by now.
Yeah.
For those who are still watching, hashtag get your weight up. If you want to register to win,
it's a gift, but I'm still gonna draw because listen, it is what it is.
Okay. So are you ready to draw now?
Yeah, I'm ready. We're gonna do it.
How many names?
23
how many people?
23, 30,
23,
32.
Come on, y'all. I am stalling for you. So if you're
ready, 36.
Ike is
that's
ready,
enough.
but I am stalling.
41.
I'm stalling. Okay. Take it away, Ike.
All right, let's do it. Boom. It's going. Chad Smith rejoicing before I even hit the button. It would have been an epic had he won too, but Harold Washington is the winner today. Harold, you got to be here, right? Because we just restarted the whole thing. So
you just restarted, so you got to be here, but we need to know that you're here. So depending on, we'll give you some time to play some catch up. I'm sure you're going to be looking out for him to see if he shows up. Let's grab some comments here, starting with Alan Berry. He says, did you guys watch Alabama's spring game yesterday? As an Alabama fan, I would like to know your opinions. Now, here's the thing, Alan.
No.
You got the wrong ones today because Ike is super duper petty when it comes to Alabama. He ain't watching it. What I did hear from a lot of Alabama fans who were kind of on the QB situation. I don't really want to speak on Alabama situation because like Ike, I haven't watched it. But what I will say is we're going to see what Tommy Rees can do. As Ike indicates that he's allergic to talking about Bama. So, we're about to see how good Tommy Rees is because I hear that the guys didn't really set the world on fire. But again,
it's a spring game.
I also recall when Lane Kiffin got there and there was a certain QB, what's his name? Blake Sims.
Blake Sims, right.
He didn't exactly look all that strong in spring either, but he ended up being very serviceable for Bama that upcoming fall. But if you listen to how a lot of fans reacted after spring, you thought Alabama was going down in the dumps. So we're going to see what kind of a job Tommy Rees has or he does. And he has some talented kids to work with. So I'm not going to say that they're not talented. Again, it's just coming behind Bryce Young and the run that Bama has had of QBs. You know, it's going to be a work in progress. It's going to be a work in progress. So you're going to find out just how good of a QB coach he is. P Pass says, can Landon King be used as an H-back? Landon King doesn't strike me as a really physical guy in that percent.
That's going to be your problem, is whether or not he's going to be able to block the way that you need to for an H-back type, right? And they're likely going to use their tight ends in that H-back role. I doubt that they slide a wide receiver, which he's currently working out of the wide receiver room, over it to play an H-back. So I'm going to go with he could, but no, not likely. But yeah.
Okay. All right. Also, Harold Washington says, I'm feeling lucky. Ain't no feeling, you are, sir. You won. Here's what we need you to do. We need you to email us at business@thewar rapport. Business@thewar rapport, where we need your name, of course, your physical address, and your shirt size. According to Mike G, you get schmediums if you send us the incorrect shirt size. So send your correct shirt size, and that shirt will be coming your way, courtesy of GWT2 Energy Consulting Services. Congratulations and thanks again for watching. Speaking of GWT2 Energy Consulting Services, our guy Walt joins us in the comments. Good to see you, Walt. Big win for softball. A win over Montana should not be overlooked. Definitely. And then again, I appreciate you guys for hanging out with us while watching softball this afternoon. So appreciate you guys for that, showing us love. Kenneth Redding asks, did we make a mistake by not going hard after the kid from Oklahoma State? I believe he's referring to the kid who's now at Ole Miss.
I mean, did we make a mistake? That's difficult to say, because honestly, I think
he's second string at Ole Miss, right?
I don't know that he's better than Robbie Ashford. So like, if you're not a Robbie Ashford fan, I don't know how you could be a Spencer Sanders fan. Yeah, I don't see it, because I think that they're very similar quarterbacks. Now, Spencer Sanders has more experience, but that's even worse that he looks like he does with more experience. So higher ceiling, in my opinion, for Ashford over Sanders, because of how little on-field experience that Ashford has. And I do think that Ashford's the better runner of the two. So I don't know that I would say that was a mistake. No.
I don't think so either. And again, I trust Hugh Freeze and staff's evaluation of the guys that they're looking at. They definitely took a hard look at that kid and they decided to pass.
Yeah.
Brad Brownie asked, didn't that dude have like 1 million interceptions? He was turnover prone.
Yeah.
He was very turnover prone for sure. And again, you got to trust Hugh Freeze and staff's evaluation. Again, this is his position. He has guys on staff who are really good at scouting and identifying talent for this position. I just think, given the situation that they've walked into and the timing of everything, slim pickings. And even if you do find an ideal guy, look at the competition. Look at the competition that you have to get for schools that are looking for that particular guy, which is why the McCall thing was kind of disappointing in how it panned out, because according to reports, he reached out to Hugh Freeze first.
Right.
So it seems like everything was lining up in place and then boom, you know what I mean? So I just think with the whole Sanders kid, again, he hasn't even, from what I've heard, I think he's second string at Ole Miss.
Yeah.
So it isn't like he came into Ole Miss and even beat out the current guy.
That's super disappointing for him, because again, he was in that position where he has limited eligibility. He thought he was going to go somewhere and win a starting job, and it doesn't look like he's going to do that. So we'll see. But if he gets beat out by Jackson Dart, he's going to feel really bad about himself. So
yeah, probably. You got anything else on this, Ike? Any other guys that we want to talk about? I think we can mention Jaden Muskrat, who actually visited over the weekend. That's the transfer kid from Tulsa, right. Who projects. I think he played some right tackle, but he projects as a guard. He was visiting this weekend, hosted by Wade and a few other guys. So from what we've been told, that visit has been going rather well. I'm curious to see if we hear anything from him in the next few days. We will definitely keep you guys posted on that. Also, what are your thoughts on Emmanuel Pregnon, who's the Wyoming transfer guard? Do you think that Auburn can get him down for a visit?
I don't know. I mean, he is a guard, so I think we have a lot more guards that are already on this team. So if you bring him in, I think you run into the same type of situation, which I don't know that they're as worried about this. But if you bring him in, do some of the guys who are projected as guards say, all right, well, you guys aren't happy with us here on the interior, let me go find someplace else. But we talked a little bit about this on one of the morning drops last week. I think that that's probably a likely scenario, but your question is, do we think we can get him in for a visit? I don't know, because he's got a lot of offers out there already. The minute
20, at least 20.
Yeah. The minute he sniffed the transfer portal, people were like in his inbox, sending him the hey, big head text. So I don't know. We'll see.
I tell the people what they should be anticipating coming up and how they can get access to it, sir.
Join button, baby. Hit that join button. You want to be in here on the film review. If you like film, then this is the time to get in because we are going to do exhaustive. We already did our first one. So if you join today, you can go back as a patron and rewatch the film review I did Thursday. I started with Robbie Ashford and his A-Day performance. So look, he only had 5 throws and I still had 30 minutes of film talking about that. So I can go in depth with some film people. So we're going to go in here and we're going to talk exhaustive about all of the things that I was able to witness from A-Day. We'll talk some more basketball stuff. We'll even look at some of the film from last year about some of the players who are projected to have big roles this season. So get in here with this film review and I will not let you down. Membership gifting. If you are a member and you want to give a gift of membership to somebody else, you can do that right now before we get out of here from the live chat. If you didn't have an opportunity to win something today, you could always go to our website, warreport.com, and shop, and you can purchase your own stuff. A lot of great stuff. Some new stuff coming up soon. Don't worry, it's summertime. I got you with some new merch packs that will be dropping out there. So stay tuned for that. Audio only situation popping over there at the Auburn Express, powered by the War Rapport. Make sure that you are locked in with us on your podcast platforms. A lot of great content that you can only get on that podcast. So make sure you go over there. The Auburn Express, powered by the War Rapport. Boom.
Great show as always. Great to see you guys in the comments. Before you get out of here, we need you to do us a favor and share this content on social media. That is Facebook and Twitter. Smash that like button. Help us with the YouTube algorithm. And if you're new to our channel, we would love for you guys to subscribe, hit the notification bell for sure. I mentioned social media. I mentioned Facebook and Twitter, but we're also on Instagram at The War Rapport. We're also TW Rapport on TikTok. Tipping out, guys, but we will be back at it again in the morning with the morning drop. Ike, maybe we'll be able to join in, guys, and discuss some of the latest news regarding Auburn athletics and sports. You definitely want to be there. Hopefully you got your morning drop or War Rapport mug for the morning drop. Definitely check in. Until then, guys, enjoy the rest of your weekend. And as always, War Eagle.
War Eagle.